If you even also casually follow anime and manga, chances are that you've seen this generic looking buddy on Facebook or Twitter or whatever in the last 2 months. So many people have already made videos on this manga, so I won't waste too much time on the intro. If you don't know what this manga is called Kagurabachi, written by Takeru Hokazono. With only 2 chapters out, this title climbed all the way to the top 5 of the Manga Plus rankings, beating out the likes of My Hero Academia. Shonen Jump also put the manga on the front cover on the release of its very first issue, and this astronomical rise has led to some people claiming the manga is a, quote, industry plant. An industry plant is a term that originates from the music scene. It refers to artists that had major label backings and connections since the beginning of their careers, but their come up and rise to fame was presented as being organic or self-made when it is not. The term has become quite popular over the years and crossed over to other industries outside of music. Such is the case with the subject of this video, a manga. Many people are indeed calling Kagurabachi an industry plant because of how quick it became popular, but is it really an industry plant? Well, the initial push by Shonen Jump definitely seems to suggest that way, but most of Kagurabachi's fame came to be in an ironic manner because it became huge through word of mouth in the same way that Morbius did its sarcasm. So I don't know if we can really call it an industry plant. I guess it's just a funny word to use for any popular media that became huge through inorganic means. Anywho, the point of this video is not to gatekeep the term, I'm just here to discuss whether or not Kagurabachi is actually worth reading. You see this random manga become the quote-unquote face of generic shonen, and you can't help but wonder, is it good though? Or is it as bad as it's implied to be? A few months ago, it's like every creator on YouTube made a video about Kagurabachi, but back then there were so little chapters out, and I don't think it was easy to gauge whether or not the manga actually had some promise. So I waited until it kinda made sense for a channel like mine to review the manga. So without any further ado, let's go. Is the industry plant manga actually good? We follow the story of Chihiro Rokuhira, who is the son of a legendary blacksmith that made these magical katanas that played a big part in ending a huge war that took place earlier in the story. This achievement elevated the father of our protagonist to the status of a hero, but one day, a group of evil sorcerers called Hishaku would attack our duo and steal the katanas, also inflicting major injuries upon the father, and effectively ending his life in the process. This tragedy would send Chihiro on a path of vengeance, and that's where our story begins. As expected of the quote-unquote face of generic shonen, the setup is quite simple and familiar, but after reading 12 chapters of the manga that is currently out, I'm actually pleasantly surprised. So far, Kagurabachi does not reinvent the wheel or reaches any groundbreaking heights of storytelling or anything, but it's a manga that understands the fundamentals of telling a story and understands what it's trying to do and manages to do that with efficiency. Let me explain. The story is about this generic revenge plot, right? Yes, but at the same time, there are these little pockets of depth that goes a long way. One of the main narrative devices of the manga is the katanas made by Chihiro's father that we discussed. They go into detail about how these weapons can cause destruction, as well as protect people, and about how people in possession of such weapons have a huge responsibility on their shoulders. They explore this theme of duality really well in the first confrontation between Chihiro and the first major antagonist Genichi Sojo. Genichi is an influential figure in the underworld, and he's in possession of 2 of the katanas that Chihiro's father made. Genichi looks up to Chihiro's father and absolutely worships him, but he has a very twisted perception of his idol. He believes that swords aren't meant for anything but destruction, and he can't fathom the idea that his hero would think any different. And so the clash of ideologies between Chihiro and Sojo was actually pretty compelling, especially for being only the first major arc. Chihiro won't stand for his father's name being tainted, and there's more drama than just "I want revenge for my father." Again, it's not anything out of this world per se, but the antagonist being a meaningful contrast to the protagonist is one of the basics of telling a story, and it was quite nice to see just how well done these fundamental aspects are in Kagurabachi. Time and time again, we've seen mainstream shonen stories fall apart and fail to tell a basic story in the midst of all the cool fights and high-budget animation, but so far, Kagurabachi is telling a really focused and linear story without becoming too self-indulgent. The world building is also pretty good. There is this organization called Kamunabi that's like a government-sanctioned elite force, and while they're good guys, kinda, they actually don't like Chihiro's father all that much, and don't rate him because the weapons he made can have negative consequences, and I expect there to be some interesting tension between those members and the protagonist in the future. I also really like the art, especially the setting and how it's drawn. It's like it's modern and ancient at the same time. And magic aside, the characters have these sword fights and street level encounters that make the surrounding areas and architecture feel engaging. Once again, it's not anything crazy innovative, Manga like Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen have done similar fights for sure, but you'll have fun as long as you don't go in expecting a generational masterpiece, which I don't think you will anyways, if you read it because of the memes that is. And in most stories where the main setup is the death of a family member, you actually don't get to see the deceased character all that much. They're mostly an off-screen presence, so you actually don't connect with the pain of the protagonist all that much, like you just don't care. But here, the father also gets some really good scenes that really flesh out the relationship between him and his son, and I respect the decision to actually include him as a character and not just a plot device. It goes without saying though, the manga is not without its shortcomings. In the relatively short 12 chapters, there are already some likable supporting characters and a pretty captivating antagonist, but the protagonist Chihiro is quite bland in my opinion. Other than his respect for his father's legacy, which I'll admit that part is really well done, he doesn't have much personality outside of that, and I think that's also where the bulk of the memes are coming from. We see his father die and then we immediately jump to when he's already become an edgy brooding badass, and all of the development in between gets skipped, at least for now. When a manga like Vinland Saga for example has done the exact same premise in extreme detail, this can kind of pale in comparison if you will. There is also this story with a little girl, Cha Kiyonagi, who has this ability to regenerate, and she's being used as a guinea pig by Sojo. And while she's an adorable character and they succeed in making Sojo look like the worst scum of the earth, I can't help but point out that this storyline feels a bit derivative of the My Hero Academia overhaul arc. With all of that being said though, 12 chapters is still far too little to actually form a concrete opinion, but so far I can confidently say that the positives outweigh the negative. And TikTok and Twitter trolling aside, this kind of hype has never been seen before for a new manga. And on the topic of parallels between music and manga, we have seen meme rappers become well-respected artists anyway, so if Takeru plays his cards right and just keep delivering a consistently good product, I believe this can go somewhere. Is Kagurabachi one of my favorite ongoing manga right now? Do I think it'll become a future classic? I mean, in my opinion, at the risk of sounding pretentious, shounen fantasy mangas typically don't reach that height for me personally, but I don't think it's fair to call this the Morbius of manga. Because I've seen shounen anime with a huge followings that I find to be so drab and boring, and without saying any names, but those actually feel to me like the manga equivalent of Morbius. With Kagurabachi, I see enough life, passion, and a genuine intent to tell a good story for me to say this manga should be taken seriously, or at the very least, don't deserve to be the sole scapegoat of the collective burnout people are experiencing with shounen. I don't exactly think Takeru is tripping about the perception of his manga as a semi-ironic joke, because it's more attention anyway, but I don't know. Maybe he is and maybe he isn't, but believe it or not, right now in Japan, Kagurabachi is not safe at all from getting discontinued or cancelled. Very recently, it came in last in the Shonen Jump TOC. If you don't know what that is, I'll put it up on the screen right now. You can't compare this to Morbius. Even if we are to argue that it initially had the Shonen Jump machine behind it for a while, it's not like it's doing it any favors with the Japanese audience. Morbius is a soulless piece of media from a billion-dollar corporation. Kagurabachi is the work of one man, with at best maybe a few assistants. Subjective quality of the manga aside, this is hard work. I don't think any artist wants to leave behind a legacy where his series got cancelled at 12 chapters or so, and it was infamous for being a meme the entire time. Because that's going to stick with someone forever, and not in a good way. So even though we can't do anything as international fans to, save the manga or whatever, I implore you to just keep supporting it on Manga Plus. It does not cost you anything.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe for more.